Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth? Hello! We are back for another week of Tourney Ground. My name's still Mickey. This is still Carlo. How you doing, Carlo?
Really good, yeah. It's been a week off for me and a week away, week at a tournament, and it's been good times. But good to be back. Good to be chatting song. Come back, tell everybody why they're shit.
I mean, it is literally the part of the week where I enjoy the most. Talk about song. I get to talk with a very good player, and I get to be told that I'm basically terrible every week. It's great. I love it. As I'm sure everyone else tunes in and does exactly the same reason. Cool. So, loads of news has happened this week. Yet again, in traditional CMON style. We've heard loads of stuff about new releases. We've heard loads of stuff about new things coming out. Lots of stuff happening. Let's start off with the big one. The update is still due in December at some point. No releases.
Are you just saying that, or has there been... There's been no mention of it, right? Or has there been mention of it?
There hasn't even been a mention of it.
Right, okay. Yeah. But we're still going off. Last information we received is it will come out in December. Unless it clashes with releases, which it hasn't.
As far as we're aware, anyway. So, there is actually a funny piece of news, though, that most people here won't be aware of, and I'll put it up on stream so you guys can see it. This was hilarious. Yesterday I was having this conversation with somebody. We have had an article published on a
that's true.
Spanish web. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I've
Spanish
seen this.
website. This is utterly brilliant.
I was browsing Dragonstone as I do.
Yeah. This article has been published to. This was yesterday or 3 days ago, December the 10th, 2021. Vision in the flames. What does the future hold? Someone genuinely posted this up as oh look, it's a new article. They've shown off new Stag Knights. Of course, they're in
new
Spanish.
Stag Knights.
This article has changed, by the way. When they were shown in this article originally, it had the old asset in. They've now shown this asset, which is the updated asset, and all of this is from December 10th, 2020's Vision in the Flames. And this particular online news site only just posted it up 3 days ago.
Oh wait, so this is nothing to do with CMON?
No. This is not a CMON release.
Oh, I assumed that this was like a really slow CMON Spanish post.
As far as I'm aware,
or like Asmodee Spain post.
No, it's
okay.
It's a separate magazine, like online magazine, basically called Edge, and they put up this. I did think it was hilarious because it is basically an online magazine, if you will, posting an update from a game it semi-follows, and the update's like a year too late. I feel like this is very in keeping with CMON, and the industry a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. It felt very CMON. It felt so CMON. It's actually quite telling that I thought it was CMON. I thought I saw that there'd been a Spanish post, and I saw the discussion in Dragonstone, and I just assumed that it had been a CMON fuck up.
No, I mean it might well have been a CMON Spain fuck up, but yeah. Anyway, that's the thing that happened. So for those watchers in Spain who watch us every week from Spain, well done. You're finally getting the 2021 faction packs. Oh wait, no, you're not. Oh dear. They've been hitting the shores in the US though, so I mean, there's a bit.
They have.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think the US and like actual US stores physically, and miniature market and all that stuff that they have over in the US. I think they genuinely have it for sale, which is great. Not in the UK yet, but maybe.
Maybe we'll see. I mean, if all the stuff that they've quoted for January comes out, then we'll see.
They're interesting. The faction packs now are actually a really interesting thing. Of like, I mean, I've been out, I've played with people, I've been to different stores. Like, people have them. Some people are playing with printed cards. Some people are playing with real cards. Some people are doing whatever. Very few people who turn up and play seem to care about them and want them because they're so late, right? Like they bought them and imported them, or they just don't care anymore. They're just like, oh, I cancelled my order and I printed the cards and I'm fine with the printed cards. Plus, like they're going to change anyway next week, blah blah blah, kind of attitude towards it now, instead of being like, oh, I'm desperate to get hold of them. It is it's interesting. The question is are there players who aren't playing because they don't have them? That's the thing that you never know. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can meet people, play with them, and they can be like, yeah, but I don't give a shit about these cards anymore. But are there people who are just like, I'm not playing the game until my physical cards come?
Well, that was
Which
a discussion, right? That was a discussion we had 6-7 months ago now, when the update was originally released, with the in May-June time, when the stuff actually got released as the pack online. We had this exact discussion. We were saying people aren't playing the game, people aren't moving over to 2021, and I'm sat here as a player who moved over to 21 like at the earliest possible moment, and I'm kind of laughing now a little bit at people still on 1.6, because I'm like,
yeah,
waited
it's
this
9
long.
months now, right? Isn't it? Or
It's
8
well, I
months?
mean, it's 12 months since the release, inverted commas, of the visions. It's been about 9 months since the last visions, I think, but the actual release was April, May time. So I think it's been about 8 months of like basically waiting. I have to double check. June was when was when we updated the site, and the site was about a month after the release, wasn't it? I think so. I want to say that the release was late April. I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, they're lucky that they managed to get the cards out. Like, thinking about it now, in the US, like, I mean, they managed to release them in 2021, thankfully.
Yeah.
they managed to release the 2021 update, which was supposed to, remember, the initial thing said it will come out. It said Greyjoys will come out in January.
Q1, yeah.
Actually, no, they said in January, and then they said that in Q1, roughly 4 weeks later, the faction packs would come out. So they basically said that faction packs will be out in February. They finally managed to put them out in December.
Yeah.
Aren't we so glad that they did the digital update to War Council?
It's unbelievable. The digital update has, inverted commas, saved not A Song of Ice and Fire necessarily, but it's definitely saved what the communities have had. And you know what? Communities are growing again. New people are getting into the game at every given moment. We see post and post and post about every people growing. There are just as equal, roughly, numbers of people leaving. I think the whole community as a whole is probably actually staying roughly the same number of people. But what we're seeing is perhaps less active people drop out and more active people pick it up, which is a positive. Like, that is a positive thing. But we are seeing, I don't think we're actually seeing game growth so much as game stability.
I agree with the chat that actually, and like I'm saying, for experienced players of the game, people are going to events, and the people that I play games with and meet and talk to across the UK, at least, it's not an issue that anybody's talking about or cares about.
Not anymore.
But anybody who's trying to introduce somebody to the game and wants to be able to say, here's a game, buy it, it's a big barrier. Like, to be like, oh, by the way, you have to do it digitally. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, which is a problem.
I was going to say a bit of a shout out to the Reddit community here, because I saw a post, this was earlier today. He said, do I need the Baratheon starter to play? Right, I'm not going to read out the post to you, but essentially, he'd bought some, the Renly Side Heroes box, he'd bought some Rose Knights and Thornwatch, and was basically saying, I want to run a Renly army, do I need the Baratheon starter? Because I don't really want to play any of the units inside the Baratheon starter. I've got the heroes I want from the Renly box. is it required? And I was like sat here and I was like, yeah, you need the starter box because it gives you some base units which you can use as kind of like filler, some more NCUs that you can use as filler, and ultimately the tactics deck. And I actually thought about it a little bit and was like, maybe
You don't need the tactics deck.
Yeah, maybe you just don't need the starter. If someone else has got terrain, you don't need the starter at all. Actually,
I mean, I'd still buy it.
oh, of course,
I'd still recommend everybody buys the starter. Like the value, I tell you what, you need it because you gotta have those dice. You gotta have them faction dice.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm actually super sad. Well, not sad. Sad's not the right word. Super glad that the Lannisters and Starks will presumably now come with Lannister and Stark dice. You're not going to be put behind a Kickstarter exclusive, which was the dice. If you don't know, they still supposedly are Kickstarter exclusive, as are their plastic rulers, as are other things. But anyway, I'd get the starter set even for Baratheons, where with Baratheons I'd barely use anything from it, just some Wardens. The NCUs aren't particularly good. The commanders aren't particularly good. The base deck's not particularly good. In case I
1.6 or 2021? Which one are you talking about? Because I know the answer's the same anyway. But
yeah, both. No. And if you have belief, if you have faith, the Baratheon dice are amazing. You just gotta pray for stags. Pray for stags. Plus, they look really nice. Like genuinely, they've really improved the colors. Like it's such a small thing. I'm actually, if people don't know, I'm a real dice weirdo or nerd or obsessive. I'm obsessed with dice, not with luck. The size, the tactile feel, the noise they make. Honestly, the CMON dice are actually really nice. They tick all the boxes, and particularly the new Baratheon ones are a really nice color combo. But the old Lannister ones, not as nice as they could be.
You can tell what I'm getting Carlo for Christmas coming. One dice. No,
old Lannister dice.
One Lannister. No, not even one old Lannister die. I'm gonna get you like one old, like retail like Stark dice or something for a faction you won't use, and it will just be. Oh god, that would be. You'll hate it. Yeah. So I mean, that was really interesting because obviously it made me think. Yeah, you don't need the starter. Which we're gonna sit here and say you should buy starters. They are. Like on one hand, we're like saying, "CMON, you're crap," but on the other hand, we're saying, "Yeah, you should totally give them money and buy this thing. It's a good value for money product, right? You should buy starters." But yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird that you can actually turn around to say someone at the moment and say, "You know what? Yeah, you don't need the starter for your army." And there are some boxes which could definitely get away with that. If you're not interested in running a cavalry-based Drogo-style army. Don't bother with the Targaryen starter. If you're not interested in running Stannis 1 or Renly 1 and want to run Faith side or a Renly side, buy just the Heroes box and their appropriate units.
Yeah. You can get away with buying Mother of Dragons and a unit of Pikemen.
Yeah.
Although you
wouldn't have Illyria.
You're going to need some NCUs.
You wouldn't have Illyria, and that would be big sad. But yeah, it's not impossible. But yeah, so I mean, I'm in agreement there. Interesting. It certainly made me think about it. The other thing, the other piece of news that we did have, which people may have seen, may have not seen, and it's not really news, but it is something, is this, which is the render of the Greyjoy activation banners.
Which not everybody was wildly complimentary about the design of.
No.
I forget exactly what it was described as, but it's not great.
I don't know. The thing, you know what it is? Do you know what it is about it? I don't even know what's so bad about it, but I don't look at it and think that looks really nice. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't tell you why I don't like it. I just don't. It doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
It really doesn't help that the squid they've chosen in the game across the board, in the source material, it's perfect as well. It really does look like a phallus.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's the meme. That's a penis. You know, like that's a penis.
Yes, this is the thing. It's not even a meme or a joke. It's just like that's true. That's a fact.
That's a penis.
it's a penis.
Yeah, the top tentacles are a little bit odd. They're a little bit showy. 6 tentacles, bit weird. But
I also don't understand the skull in the middle. I don't get that. Like,
yeah, but I mean, yeah, as people are saying, like as Sunday's saying, it's a banner.
Exactly.
Who cares?
I'll be honest with you. I really like the free folk ones, partially because of the patchwork on them. Like you can kind of be a bit creative with. I think I quite like. But yeah, no, you're right. Most of the banners are pretty meh.
Yeah, I used to really like them when they first came out, and I only really had Lannisters, and I really liked them. I quite like the Lannister banners, even though they're a little bit flat. The line's a bit flat. I think that's the problem. The symbol is too flat.
Yes.
It makes it really, really hard to paint. So also, I don't think that they look as good painted as they generally could. Some people are saying that the free folk ones are nice. The free folk ones are nice because of that reason, that they don't have a symbol on them.
Yeah, they've got the shield and the weapon. It's not a symbol. It's a selection of things on the banner, which is better.
Exactly. But if you compare that to like unit banners, right? When you look at a unit banner, it could be anything, Rose Knights, Flayed Men, all that stuff. The symbol is on it, but it's not a flat symbol. It's very rounded, and it makes it much easier to paint and give it detail and give it life. So that's actually what's really turned me off the banners slowly over time. And even though I'm a absolute completionist, I actually don't rush out to buy the banners for the armies that I play now. I'm not bothered.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even think. This is again no disrespect to people who have done it. Like I think I know what the Stark ones look like. I know what they all look like, but even the Targaryen ones, like I don't think I've ever seen a well painted or a Targaryen banner which I look at and think I'm gonna remember that. Do you know what I mean? The free folk banners that I see, I remember my own because I painted them. The only Stark ones I really remember off the top of my head are the ones that Dan has because I see them so often. I know your Lannister ones for the same reason. The actual best banners, and Carlo will probably back me up on this. The best banners I've ever seen for the game, and the best activation tokens I've ever seen, are our mate Dan's homemade crows for his Night's Watch. The flocks of crows, which are just brilliant.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like the best banners that I've seen on multiple occasions have been 3D printed, or like from other games. Like people have done nice stuff with activations. I find the generic ones a bit flat, which is sad, but whatever. It's a completely optional part of the game. You don't want them done by.
It is true to say that I think the banners are one of the few times where I think customization in the game has trumped base provision. I'm not talking about people making their own bases and doing fancy things. That's not what CMON are trying to provide. But they're providing you with an activation banner, and people have just done a better job, which is a shame, a little bit. But hey ho, as you say, it's extra. Cool. Right then, should we move on to the main meat and potatoes, or as I should say, the main palace?
The main squid.
The main squid. Today we are going to look at not power rankings. It is power rankings. But also we're going to look at the badges as well, which is where we're going to lead to off the back of talking about this. Over the last couple of weeks, Carlo missed out on the truly peak of it, really. But over the last
what did you even talk about last week without me?
We talked about terrain and like what terrain was good. Exactly. You hate terrain.
Yeah, I know. There's no one fits all answer. So I'm glad you got that out of the way while I was away.
It was like a scale of answers. Like, would you rate this worthy to consider or not worthy to consider? And strangely enough, because you didn't watch the episode, Carlo, classic format. The hedge. Do you think it was worth to consider for any faction?
No, never.
Correct.
Don't know.
That was the important one. Anyway, so things have been changing a lot. Free Folk did go above Targaryen and Night's Watch for a while. Night's Watch dropped below Targaryen for a short while. Night's Watch decided to come back up again, and it's kind of settled again to what we're more kind of standardly seeing. Free Folk have definitely made a massive surge recently. I don't think this is a surprise. I think that people have been using mag and 1-1 a lot more in games, and I think that people just haven't got the solutions for it because they're not used to having to face them. They are a threat, unlike normal giants unwounded. So I think we're seeing a bit of like a. I do genuinely believe that that's an impact of those things because that's the only real significant change we've seen. I don't think chariots have been the source of that change significantly. Not saying that chariots are a bad unit by any stretch. Chariots are a good 4-point unit, but chariots don't offer something that free folk didn't already have. Not really. Whereas I think giants are offering a unique perspective and something that completely different strategy to deal with than raiders.
Yeah, I do think that it's very important to be able to offer two very different list styles, and free folk have been on one particular list style since the start of 2021, which unsurprisingly was actually the same list style. I know everybody tried to make it not be that, and Simon desperately wanted it to not be that, but it was the same list that they used last edition too, funnily enough.
Basically,
yeah. And yeah, it's good. It's good that we're seeing a lot more people use more interesting list design space, shall we call it, for free folk, at least showing something different. And I personally think that 1-1 and mag as combat units are interesting choices, and are probably relatively fairly costed, which is always hard to, which is quite a high barrier for their points cost, right? Like, I'm saying you're basically worth that really high cost. You're not overpowered anyway. It's not like, oh my god, he's brought mag. I should, God, why is he being such a power gamer or anything like that? The way people have negative reactions to those things, but they're okay. They're okay.
Interesting. Waynus says, I've been out of the game for too long. Are Baratheons good? Baratheons, unfortunately, are not great. That being said, more on Baratheons later. But, yeah. Night's Watch, one of the criticisms that I had, and again, I can't decide if this is a good or bad thing, because ultimately we don't decide these rankings. These rankings are decided by people. And I think to some degree that this is a positive thing. Night's Watch have fallen, significantly so, compared to their previous rankings. The play rate of Offal has absolutely plummeted, basically. And I'm not saying like, oh, Offal gunline lists. No, Offal's play rate is just bad. Given that we just had a weekend, what we see 1, 2, 3, 4 games, 5 games over the weekend, a whole weekend of events, of tournaments, of people playing the game. We saw 5, and then we saw like 1 a couple of days before that, and then maybe few the weekend before. It's still played. He's still definitely played, but his play rate is nowhere near the 5-6 games he was getting a day in some cases earlier in the season. I think just people have just had enough. What's interesting as well is that Offal is getting losses. There's a long string of losses that
that's a chunk of losses.
Yep, chunk of losses. And when Offal loses, the faction loses, because at the moment he's the only one really pulling them up. Which again is mental to me. I don't know if you had any real thoughts on it, Carlo.
I do think that there's a huge weight of people not wanting to field Offal, particularly like Night's Watch as a whole has a bit of a tarnish put over it, but Offal specifically bears the brunt of that, and I think rightly so. Like in some ways, like rightly so in that I think that he is easily the most abusable thing in the game. Still, in my mind. In my eyes, do you know what I mean? If you want to abuse a list and stretch the limits of the way the balance currently is, and you want to go out there to win, then Offal is the right answer. If that's the question, how will I win the most consistently? the most easily and with the least kind of like chance that somebody can make a risky play and still beat me. The best reliability is just play Offal. Like you want to win a big tournament. If that's the actual goal, if that's the question, the answer is, well, then play Offal. Nob's asking, is it people not wanting to be that guy? And I think that is very much the case, personally. I think that there's a lot of self-limitation, a lot of tournaments still running limitations on Relentless, on bans, things like that. I spoke about it, I forget, it's been a while, so, I might as well speak about it again. Like, I do think it's very interesting that I think that currently, as we stand, people don't feel that way about Targaryens. Targaryens are the cool, good faction to play, right? Like, you want to win a tournament, but you don't want to be a dickhead about it, then play Targaryens. But, like, you want to really win a tournament and don't give a shit what people think about you, well, then you should still be playing Night's Watch, right? Like, I still think the Night's Watch are more powerful than Targaryens, but like because Targaryens are second best and they don't get all this focus and attention, I still think that people consider Targaryens cooler. I do actually think that Targaryens are cooler in that there is a lot more design space for them. There is a lot more variation in list build. Interesting that the things that people really go after are what they consider like cookie cutter lists that they've seen before. For whatever reason, people hate people who run a list which they've seen somebody else run. And unfortunately, Mother Dragons will always at 40 points fall under that category because she can't be something else. Like there is no other list that she could be.
I think, for what it's worth, we talk about Mother of Dragons and we talk about the list changes. Like, I'm 90% sure that there are 3 Mother of Dragon lists, and anything that isn't those 3 Mother of Dragon lists that you see regularly is probably just significantly worse or someone limiting themselves deliberately. But it's usually something along the lines of 3 NCUs with Barristan or 3 NCUs with not Barristan, the Tycho Illyria combo and whatever. And then this weird Mother of Dragons list I have seen more recently, which is running a 2 NCU version with like an extra activation on the board. That's it.
I was just about to say, I'm semi interested in a list which I don't know if you count in the top 3. But I'm interested in one that has pikes, but still manages to get Barristan.
Yeah, you run
because it fields Jorah.
Yeah.
Not a 4-point NCU. But yeah, there you go. If that's the third list archetype, then you know what I mean. Like it's not even it's not that inventive, is it? Do you know what I mean? Like honestly, I was literally like looking at them, and that was literally as inventive as I could get. I was like, oh, I could save a point because I could take Jorah, or maybe what are they called? Three slaves on a base. What are they called?
Santa's elves? No, wait, hang on. Freedmen.
Freedmen. There we go. Yeah. That you can save a point by fielding Jorah or them over your classic NCU choice, which means that you free up 1 more point, which actually is a lot of points considering that there's only like a couple of spare points floating around in that entire list. But if that's caught under the third type, then I think that, there really isn't anything more that you can do with it. Jorah gets a lot. Sorry, not Jorah. Drogo gets a lot of attention, particularly now that Blood Riders have come out. But people hate Assassinate. They just do. They hate it in general. Interestingly, I often get I often get people complaining about the lists that I play. Right, like I don't play lists to make my opponent happy. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't. Nobody complained about me using Loris at the weekend, and I played a lot of Loris just in the last week. Loris has Assassinate. Nobody had an issue with that. I think there is a little bit of difference. There is a tiny bit of difference with Khal Drogo. It's the perfect storm with the fact that he can't be assassinated himself, that he's very mobile, so he can go out there and find your attachment and kill it and all these things. But I do go on.
That was what I was going to say, actually. What I've seen a lot is people's hate, if you will, and the kind of like thing that Drogo has brought to my attention a lot more recently. People don't like it assassinating their commander.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to think quite a long time about why this was an issue. And sure, there's the scoring thing and everything like that. But I was thinking about it, I was like, but you know that before you play. Like, that's a known quantity that he can do all this. If you're genuinely saying your game plan is, I'm going to sit on an objective and score 2 with my commander and hope I don't lose elsewhere, like, that's a crap game plan. Like,
I don't know what you mean.
well, no, but as in...
game plan in terms of what? That's my game plan in every single game mode ever.
Yeah, but you actually have...
So it's not a bad game plan.
No, but you have contingencies is what I mean. Like, if you come up against Drogo,
not really.
You don't go... You don't go, oh shit, I'm gonna get my commander assassinated, how do I win? It's like, you know what I mean? You are aware that Drogo exists when you build your list. True. I think that's my point, is that, like, people hate it, and it's like, oh, because it's going to assassinate my commander. And I'm like, yeah, but you know that he's going to assassinate your commander, so do something about it.
It's interesting. People are talking about it, right? Like that. It's very important in certain missions where you're going to score 2 points, right? But, like, I think people overlook the fact that he's your opponent's commander too.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so he doesn't get to sit on an objective and score 2 points. Do you know who I mean, like, actually, I'm not saying it's MPE, right? Like, I'm just saying, do you know who I'm more nervous about seeing in my opponent's list? Carl, right? Because he's a 1 point throwaway attachment that can be in a 4 point throwaway unit, which can just fucking rocket itself at my commander. And it doesn't have to be in their commander's unit, right?
0 investment risk.
Yeah, it's such a low risk, high reward strategy that they can come after my commander while keeping their commander safe. And that's something that I am scared of, right? You come after me with Drogo, I'm like, well, you've invested your commander into this exchange. So, you know what? If it plays off for you, then that's my fault for not being able to, like, counter and swamp your commander. I think it's quite important actually that Drogo loses Swift Retreat or whatever card he does from his deck, because I think that's actually super important that you are quite heavily invested into that attack with Drogo. There aren't high activation Drogo lists that I've seen do well at all. Targaryens overall aren't playing hugely high activation because they're super maneuverable and super aggressive, and they're good units are all in the 6 and plus category. I think that I'm not scared of Drogo myself, but it's interesting people's perceptions. Anyway, back to the initial discussion, which is people. I think that Targs are very powerful. I think that people accept them as, like, maybe like as higher skill than Night's Watch, or they're just more accepting of people playing and winning tournaments with Targaryens. They're less branded as win at all costs players. Unless you play MOD, there still seems to be this thing on, like, and you know, like, I definitely heard a lot of it at the weekend. There was somebody who brought MOD and again intended to never play MOD. They just brought it as one of their lists, right? Like, but it was just like list chicken of, like, whether or not their opponent thinks that they might play it, but no, they were never going to play it because it's an MPE. It's like, well, okay, fair enough if you want to do that. Again, Drogo gets away in the same way that Targaryens get away with being very, very powerful without getting attacked for being MPE to play against as a whole faction, in the same way that Night's Watch do. Night's Watch draw all the attention away from Targs in my mind. Yet I don't think that they're wildly different in strength. Like, I do think that Night's Watch are better.
Yeah,
I'm not lying. You know, like, I'm not saying they're as good as each other.
I think the significant difference,
way.
I will say the significant difference is that Night's Watch, everything they do is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's everything they have is good. Don't get me wrong. Like, but like, they're not going to field much cavalry, and their cavalry, generally speaking, isn't very good. So their cavalry is either like the flayed men stuff, which at this point you've seen them before, and like, or it's just infantry. And so as a result, like, their game plan or strategies or things that they bring are always going to be that style Whereas Targaryens can mix it up at least, which I think is
Yeah.
why, again, people forget that Targaryen is this whole faction. It's not the fact that it's just Unsullied or just Cavalry or just this.
So, in the same way that Night's Watch are drawing all this attention, negative attention away from Targaryens mostly, although, we do see, like, Mother of Dragons and Khal Drogo sometimes getting banned along with Offal and Jon, or all Night's Watch or Relentless, blah, 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 blah. Mostly MOD, and also Khal Drogo to a part, despite the fact that I think that is wrongly placed, draw the attention away from Targaryens as a whole as being like this negative thing to play as. So I think that is very much like the cool kids. I do keep saying it, like, it's the cool army to play right now. Is like you get to be win at all costs player, basically, if you want to call it that. You get to be hyper competitive when you play Targaryens, but you don't get brandished as a dick just for having done it. Whereas I do think that, like, Night's Watch, partly from my own rhetoric and talking about how incredibly efficient, and how the fact that they won like 8 of the first 10 tournaments of the entire edition. Offal has gotten a lot of bad juju, shall we call it. People don't want to be that guy who's playing Offal.
Which is, again, not a massive issue, but has other issues, right? I mean, if we talk about meta, if we talk about gameplay, if we talk about other things,
but
comes into issues as well. Interesting, people saying people really don't like Expert Dualist. That's not a surprise. I know people don't like Expert Dualist. We spoke about it a lot before.
We spoke about it a lot in the NPE or Get Good episode, right? Like,
exactly. People hate it, and I agree that because people hate it, it's probably not good for the game. Like, it's one of those things where personally, I give a shit about it. Like, honestly, I do not give a shit. But the fact that people do means that it probably shouldn't exist in the game. And what is worth, remember, I main a faction who literally doesn't have access to it. So,
interestingly, just to Terrano, while we're talking about Expert Dualist, and we're talking about, he says Carl's way easier to avoid. Actually, I disagree. Like, Greyjoys, Carl, Trappers in a throwaway unit where you have Windermere to use tokens to shift whenever you want, plus you have high activation count, plus all these things, they easily over account for movement 6 cavalry in a 7 activation list. I'm more scared of a 9 activation Carl who has access to Windermere, because I cannot out activate you. I cannot wait for you to do it and then counter attack you. You just get to move wherever you want to be at the end of the turn. And if you want to commit that really cheap throwaway unit, which is also very defensive and holds me up for a long time, into like being your first charge, all for a 3+ roll on killing my commander, I actually think it's a really worthwhile strategy for the Greyjoys to play, particularly if they're playing something quite defensive with Iron Makers in it. But that's your personal opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like, personally, I've played Drogo quite a few times. Do not care. Do not fear him at all. I think he's quite an easy matchup.
Yeah. That's the kind of top ones there. Free Folk, again, we're saying it's the Mag 1-1 show a little bit. And I do think the Mag and 1-1 have improved Free Folk slot. I think I will say that. But actually, I think it comes back to what we've just been talking about, is that the fall off of Night's Watch. We are seeing the less optimal Night's Watch builds come in. And I don't care what people say. The optimal Free Folk lists, although they're not perfectly optimal perhaps, but they're variations on a theme, right? I can tell you for a fact that if I go and look at these Free Folk lists, the vast majority of them are going to be 8 or 9 activations. The vast majority of them are running a selection of raiders, probably with Torment Attachment, maybe him as a commander, who cares? They're probably running Mance, but they might be running one of the other various ones who are okay. Reaper, fine in my opinion. Armor, maybe a bit less. They're probably doing all of that, and they're probably running Spearwives still, and they're probably doing all the same things that make Free Folk good, with a bit of variation in. And I was telling people this yonks ago, saying I genuinely believe that these lists and this style will win events if you remove Offal. And I
Yeah.
was under that impression yonks ago.
I mean, its Achilles heel is firepower, right? Like
Yeah.
it just in general. Like it doesn't have to be Offal, but Offal is the
pinnacle.
The pinnacle of that style,
Yeah.
which is shooting just destroys Sentinel. Like if you have one Sentinel unit, then shooting means that I can shoot it and kill it without it being able to trigger, because I can focus it down. Long range shooting, of course, like short range shooting isn't shooting. Might as well not exist. It's melee by a different name in my mind. But long range shooting really lets you go out there and kill that armor unit, kill that whatever it is. Same for anything that has Sentinel on it in general. And Offal is a massive, massive problem for free folk in general, I would say. I mean, he's a problem for a lot of things, but when he's removed, free folk just are a big, big player, shall we call it? A big player in general.
I agree. I completely agree. Which is why I was definitely under the impression, after playing them a little bit more into the patch, they were, I would consider third tier with Lannister. I'm still surprised that Lannister haven't really gotten anywhere, but it's because I think of exactly what we've been talking about. They just struggle into what else is now available because of the Offal builds disappearing, right? It's actually
They
the
struggle
irony.
into everything. Yeah, they struggle into everything.
But specifically, they have dropped off since Offal's come up, or since Offal dropped off as well. And I think it's it's the irony where they had a matchup. It was by no means favorable, but because they had a matchup into something that was good, they stole points. Whereas now they're not stealing those points, which means they're dropping because they're not getting anything to steal points from.
Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Lannisters are not doing well. It does surprise me that we're not seeing more of the builds that you've talked about a lot, Carlo. I'm surprised we're not seeing a few more of that style because I do think those styles with the right changes can present big issues for some factions.
Lannisters are super interesting because I think that Lannisters are also really portrayed in a negative light, and also poor fellows specifically are portrayed in a very negative light. People don't want to see them across the table, like they really don't. And I can understand that the style can be considered negative. Control in general in the game is considered negative. Whatever control you think of, even myself, I have to agree that, do you know what I mean? Like the games that I'm just inherently more drawn towards, or like the opponent that I'm like happiest to see opposite me is aggressive. You know what I mean? Like I want to see an interesting aggressive Targ or an interesting aggressive Greyjoy opposite me on the table. They're not the factions that I play. So do you know what I mean? Like they're not the lists that I put together because they're not reliable. Like Targs are good, Greyjoys are doing fine as well, but aggression and particularly charge-based aggression is just not reliable enough to like really do that well. Doing incredibly well in tournaments is about removing randomness, like being reliable, and that's why people have issue with dragons, because yes, they added some more things in. You're still like 2 dice hitting on 2s. Do you know what I mean? Like just like the reliability at which that turns into a very consistent amount of damage just puts it into the realm of like, I can predict what's going to happen. I can predict what I'm going to do. I'm going to predict how much it's going to do, and I'm not reliant on luck or some weakened token or something like that. I'm not reliant on even your opponent's armor saves because they're out the question. It's what competitive players lean on.
I've just had a message from one of our Australian viewers who said Lance's problem is they only have one good unit outside of neutrals as well. Probably. I mean, I disagree a little bit. I do think Red Cloaks are fine. I do think Red Cloaks are very good. Not ironically into some of the stuff, but like neutrals, Red Cloaks can shut things down like Starks, like all day. They shut down opposing neutrals. I mean, who gives a shit anyway? Red Cloaks are a fucking pain in the arse of Baratheons. Like they just rinse these factions who can't even get close to them or just don't have the panic. Whereas things like Free Folk and Greyjoy, who do get rinsed by Red Cloaks a lot more, they lose more models, but they have other solutions to deal with it. Like,
I think Nobnebs, yeah, it's entirely right that Lannisters are, unfortunately, as well. I think that that's actually an interesting, like, kind of perception issue too, which is that because their competitive build is so far from what people's concept of Lannisters is, also hurts them, right? The best thing that they can build is definitely Faith and Boltons, right?
Yep.
But that's not law friendly Lannisters, right? And that's that's an absolute bastardization of like of the show of their concept and what they should be. So that's a problem. What makes Targaryens kind of interesting to people is that we are right now seeing mostly their best lists be Dothraki, right? Like Dothraki are good, and not many people have an issue with somebody fielding Dothraki opposite them when they're all Dothraki, or even some Unsullied thrown in here or whatever, right? Suddenly, the most issues that I hear are when somebody plays Drogo and a dragon together. Suddenly, it's a broken list. It's like, oh, you know what I mean? And it's like, I really think that people let law friendliness like really affect their opinion of what they think is power gaming. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've never ever built lists and considered whether or not I thought that I had too many neutrals in it to be law friendly, or like I picked neutrals based on whether or not that house ever worked. I'll very happily use Boltons with my Baratheons. I don't care that the Boltons and the Baratheons have never worked together. There are no neutral factions that have with Boltons. You know what I mean? Like, you could argue whether or not they had like Tycho on their side. Maybe had the Iron Bank. Like, I really think that when you're talking about this game, just in terms of like any kind of balance or competitive structure or anything like that, that you have to move away from whether or not you have to try and separate whether or not you think a list is law friendly and your opinion of what that represents and what it actually is on the table. Like, you want them to create synergies and strategies that make the best army that you can field feel right for the faction. But if they're unable to do that, then don't hate the player who uses the best strategies.
And yet the irony being, and Terranu's kind of right, MOD is super lore friendly, but people hate on it. Do you know what the other super lore friendly list is, Carlo?
Offal and all his builder friends.
Yeah, Offal and a bunch of builder crossbowmen with conscripts filling the line as they die up. Oh my god.
Yeah.
And they're the super lore friendly. And do you know what else used to be lore friendly, actually? Thinking about it?
Starks and all the direwolves.
Starks and all the direwolves, all the brothers and sisters joining together. With Varys to help them out, and Walder to help them in the battle as Robb fights on. It is funny. But yes, I think, well, we'll move on to it in a minute. But Lannisters really are in a weird spot. And I agree, like, I do think it is very strange that we look at 4-point poor fellows and look at the play rate and how good they are. And then you look at Lannister Guardsmen. Lannister Guardsmen are not bad, inverted commas, but Ilya's comment in chat is the most important one. And we've said it for 72 episodes now. I'm pretty sure this was like one of the first things we ever said on Tourney Ground. Mobility is really important in tabletop war games. Like, being able to move, shift plans, being able to be adaptive on the board. People have adaptive plans, right? And good players will have adaptive plans. But good players will build lists that allow them to adapt. That's actually the point. And mobility is one of the most key adaptive things you can have. It's why we will always advocate, cavalry are good. You didn't use cavalry in 1.6 because the things that were good were actually activation control with high mobility. Oh look, Starks and Free Folk.
And a card that just says, "Oh, by the way, I'm cavalry."
And a card that says I'm cavalry.
By the way, you know that infantry unit that you didn't think was cavalry? Oh, actually, it's cavalry. And you're
Quick
like,
reminder.
Secret stealth cavalry.
Yeah. Oh, if anyone's seen the Vive la Dirt League thing, you've got a horse pocket. That's what everyone's got their own little horse pocket. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like, Lannisters are in that weird spot, as we say. We then move on to Greyjoys. Greyjoys have kind of made a slow resurgence. I know that Sunday Slaughter, Bolton, Chris has been using a lot of Greyjoys recently, like the Euron builds. I'm really glad that he's finally turned onto Euron. I was saying to him all the way back when it was the first ELO event, briefly saying to him, "Oh mate, Euron's great. He loves Euron anyway. But, like, he hadn't played it much. He's playing it now. It's fantastic, and it is. I think Euron is very strong. So Discord is a superb ability that people cannot and should not discount. Turning off, it's one of the few and only ways of controlling and turning off people's abilities nowadays, in a proactive manner. So, but it's really interesting him using Euron, other people using Greyjoys, and they're making that resurgence. We were talking about it with some of the, I think, patrons and chat on the Discord recently, right? About different units, and specifically Silence Men versus Ironmakers. Now it's worth remembering, if you go look at unit stats, Ironmakers are lower than Silence Men. Now, Ironmakers are battling the huge weight of data they had from initial release, where basically they were just losing games because doing, and the unit rankings aren't really done on ELO, so those weight of games are a lot harder for them to overcome. But it is interesting to know that Silence Men at exactly the same points cost coming in and are just better. You know, in unit ranking terms, they are proving themselves a lot better than Ironmakers.
But they're not trappers.
I mean, they're not trappers, no.
They're not trappers and they're not bowmen.
So hang on, just remind me.
My thoughts on Greyjoys.
No. Okay.
My thoughts on Greyjoys. I'll tell you what. I got to play Greyjoys at the weekend for, like, pretty much the first time this edition. Like, I haven't actually really managed to get to play Greyjoys, so I was pretty happy about that. And actually, a big shout out to my final opponent, Aaron. He was playing
Dead Meta.
Yeah, from Dead Meta Games. He was playing starter set Greyjoys. You know, like no heroes one. It's not exactly a starter set. He had he had two starter sets, as in he had a second unit of bowmen, and one unit of Ironmakers. But that was it, right? Plus Pyko, I think, is the one other thing. But I mean, we're talking Roderick and Aaron. We're talking Victorian commander, Asher commander. Victorian's in the Asher list. Asher's in the Victorian list because he's got literally nothing else.
Yeah, he's screwed for
and
choices.
Then just Reavers, Bowmen, no trappers, some Ironmakers. And you know what? He played really well. Like, and it was a slightly odd event in terms of number of rounds or whatever, but I played him final game, top table. I mean, that's what he was playing, starter set Greyjoys. I think that coming back to Ilya's point, which is I think the thing that you almost you glossed over, which is that he says mobility creates this illusion of good gameplay. I think you skip over the illusion word, which is like I do actually really, really agree. Which I think that people think that anybody who plays a mobile army is more skilled than somebody who doesn't play a mobile army.
I do agree.
Right? Like, people hate to lose to Offal because he's unmobile, right? Like he just doesn't need to move to beat you, and people perceive movement as the highest skill part of the game. But it's odd that like a lot of people also have a ton of problems with movement and call it like gamey. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a really weird relationship, right? That like it's considered both the highest skill part of the game, and if you play a highly mobile army, and you play an aggressive army and you play something with cavalry, you're considered like a high skill player. But then as soon as you use movement to its highest potential and start to charge block and start to put things in weird positions, everybody suddenly gets a bit like, ooh, I don't like this. So I think that's a really weird relationship between what people consider high skill and then when you take it to its absolute conclusion of using the rules to their furthest extent, people don't like it anymore, right? Like they have no respect for it. Now you're gaming the system, not like just being a good player. But I think that Greyjoy's well fit into that category, and I actually get drawn into it too, which is I think that anybody who plays this high glass cannon, aggressive army well, I have respect for. I think you're a good player. But for me, a lot of that's because that's not the way I play. And I don't think it's very reliable. And I think there's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of risk and reward rather than repeatable, reliable results. And so if you're willing to take those risks, then I do have respect for that gameplay style, particularly if you do it well. It's not the style that I'm ever drawn to. I'm always drawn to control.
It is interesting. We obviously talk about aggressive side stuff generally being the weakest stuff of each faction. It is always interesting seeing people use aggressiveness. What I like to see actually is less event style, because although events are over the course of the event, you should generally, if you need to win, you need to string across a load of wins, and even coming like second, third, whatever, stringing a lot of wins together, maybe only one loss, is still an achievement. If you're playing these aggressive styles. What I like to see is people doing well on the player rankings with aggressive style lists. Because what they're saying there is I'm taking something which is traditionally not that good in the faction it is doing it in, and winning consistently against stuff I shouldn't be winning against. If we're seeing them get to 1600, cool, whatever, yeah, brilliant. But if you're seeing people running these things in like 17, 1800s and they're getting up to that level, it's like, fuck me. All right, so you actually know how to play this aggressively, and either you've just played a load of absolutely average players and you're just way better than them, and you're beating them because you're just way better, or you actually understand how to play the aggressive style.
Which is probably being way better than them.
Yeah, I mean, it is. But
two sides of the same coin there, Mickey.
It is. But I mean, we're not talking about latent skill. I mean, if I gave you an aggressive list, the chances are you'll beat average players more often than not, just because you're a better player, not because you understand aggressiveness. But that's not a dig at average players at all. It's just
I still can't win with Gregor.
That's true.
Like it's still amazing that I have a Lannister badge.
I still think it's hilarious. I'm going to tell the story again. You definitely told it before. The funniest shit I ever saw was when Carlo was 100% going to beat down Lannisters versus Starks with the Drogo commander, and then the Mountain's men fucking punted the score.
They got beaten in melee by Stark archers
with one rank.
Repeatedly, but over a couple of rounds, they both attacked continuously, and the Stark archers just came out on top by far.
The funniest shit of that game was what we took a photo earlier in the game where it was just Rickon stood against Gregor, and it was like, well, this is game over. Then he lost. Oh yeah, but that was hilarious. Anyway, it is. I do think we talk about Greyjoys before we move on to the others three. I do think Greyjoy have got a very good design space. I am worried about second hero box.
Mm-hmm.
There are elements. I think that spear-wise with the charging attack and extra hits, that is something you can't quite replicate in Greyjoy. So as a result, coordination tactics isn't going to be as powerful as perhaps it could be.
But Relentless says hello.
Yeah, I do think activation control. I think great. I mean, people think Free Folk and to some extent Night's Watch bring activation control at like 9 activations. Free Folk even being able to push it to 10 or 11. Like, I am scared that Greyjoys can regularly put out a 9 activation list, and so, oh yeah, it's actually a 10 whenever I need it to be. I'm not looking forward. I am looking forward to it a little bit. I want to see where it goes. I want to see if that style is going to come out on top, or the traditional stuff that we're seeing win a lot more is going to keep winning, and it doesn't care about that. But I am interested, but also slightly worried.
It could be. We could be wrong because, you know what I mean, like, we have been wrong about, I don't know, I'd put it at maybe like 10% of the time. I'd say about 9 out of 10 of our predictions of things that will be too powerful or not played is about right. Like, sometimes we just, like, you know, like, we both thought, and we continue to say, we thought that Red Cloaks and Lannisters were going to be more impactful and more powerful than they are, right?
I mean, the Red Cloak change did nerf them a
Yeah,
little bit.
it changes things a little bit, but, you know, but like, still, I continue to think that they should be better than they are. But, you know, when we talk about the list of all the things like Offal, we just knew that was going to be a problem straight away. MOD knew the changes weren't enough. You know, right through to like Mance would be obviously the premier way that Free Folk played. Sometimes we're wrong, but the current thought and prediction, and the problem with Greyjoys too, is my current prediction is not that the whole faction is just suddenly way, way, way too powerful, but that it is going to it is going to swallow their current mixed design space where lots of different things see play, and suddenly they're just gonna go, bump, this is how you play competitively now. Like, because I think that it's a problem for their internal balance more than I'm scared about the external balance of it. I'm scared about the internal balance of it, that it's going to be so obviously more powerful than other choices that they have within your list build style, within your design space, within all these things, that it's not that it's going to massively change the game. They're going to be dominating tournaments. It's just that it's going to be like, oh, I want to do well with Greyjoys. Well, I'll play Dagmare then. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll play Dagmare and Victorian attachment. Like, will just become the go-to.
I do think, I mean, people talk about, and I just want to bring highlight to Eric. People talk about how Eric's a terrible commander. I think he's obviously not great, right? But people talk about him like he's absolute trash tier. I don't think he's.
I mean, he is.
I personally don't think he's that bad. But, like, if I'm going to talk about Eric in the same sentence I'm going to talk about Dagmar, the stark difference between the two commanders is unreal, right? It's actually unreal how different in power level they are, and it's just obvious. You just look at it and you say, yeah, Eric's not as good as Victorian. Eric, yeah, he's probably not as good as Asher. Yeah, he's probably not as good as Balon. You know, he's probably the worst one that we've got so far. And then you look at Dagmar and you're like, yeah, he's utter crap. Like, he's just bad in comparison to what he was now with, and now he's terrible in comparison to what he's with. You're right. Yeah. You know, the balance, you know, if they came in and bridged that gap between Eric and the rest, it wouldn't have been too bad. You wouldn't, yeah, they're not great, but you know what? There's now this solid of Eric being at the bottom, whatever, and like Balon, Euron, maybe they're kind of near the top. Fine, cool, happy days. But no, you've got this and that over there now. Yeah. Yeah, Data Link, he's trashed here. Yeah, he's not good. He's not good. I think people need to play this shit before they can really make a comment on some of it, because a lot of people haven't played enough.
Don't say that, Mickey, because I've never played it, but he's trashed it.
Yeah, but you've played enough as well. I say enough.
I've never played against him either. I just, like, you know, like, who the fuck's going to use him?
Yeah. But you hear some people say it's like, oh, he's absolute trash, and it's like, yeah, he does. You're right. He has 0 impact. You know, also lots of commanders can have 0 impact if you don't draw the cards, though. Because commander attachments are bad, some of them. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. Starks. What the fuck is going on with Starks? Can we just take a moment to inspect this?
Starks have, in my mind, very limited list building options, right? Like, I think that they have a few units that are performing well, and I think that they're also one of the hardest factions to do well with because they're actually very unmobile now. They can barely afford cavalry, in my opinion. Their strongest lists generally don't have much cavalry maneuverability. Their deck lost nearly all of its cavalry maneuverability, and it also plays low activation count, right? Like high activation count effectively means maneuverability, and cavalry means maneuverability. And they're actually now one of the most defensive, immovable factions in the game.
Completely.
And they're infantry based, and they're low activation, and all those things are just like a bit like the Baratheon problem, which is like that's not easy to win with. That's one of the most difficult styles to win with. It's most easily exploited by your opponent. I think that they have a couple of good list builds, but they're so different to what they used to be. And I think that they're, like I think that they're all over the place. I think that a lot of people play, I try to avoid like saying that people just like play stuff wrong, but I think the Starks are one of the easiest things for people to play wrong because they're so different to what they were last edition. They're, in my mind, so pigeonholed into certain styles right now and certain lists and units and attachments kind of combined together that I think it's very easy for you to end up fielding something very weak without knowing it. Whereas most things, I think that like if you know your faction relatively well, you can put together a relatively strong list. I think that Starks is very difficult to come up with a strong list. And I also don't think that there's many people out there really showing people what are strong Stark lists. I wouldn't even necessarily know to be able to point people in the right direction of people who are doing really, really well with them, like on a big stage in a big tournament. So I think that that's their problem. And it just means that they oscillate between being acceptable, middle tier, and just not. And I think that they're closer to the not. I know that they've been up there in this like middle pack with Free Folk and Lannisters and Greyjoys and themselves creating this pack in the middle that like seemed like, hey, we're good balance. I have always believed them to be closer to the neutral Baratheon end of that.
Yeah, Brynden Outrider Commander currently their top performing commander by win rate at least. Howland Reed, man, Howland Reed. Like I don't think it's counted him. I'm personally on a bit of a Howland Reed trail myself. I think he's probably their best commander, not just based on the stats. I have been playing some Starks. It's my I'll want to more of that later. It's my next kind of thing to look at. I do believe that Howland is probably one of the best commanders they've got. I also really like Rob. I think Eddard is strong, but I don't think Eddard. The problem is, the moment you run Eddard, you lose Eddard NCU, and I think he's one of the few 5-point NCUs that is 100% worth it. Because of what the Starks are trying to achieve with their game plan. You need to put 13 points into NCUs, and it sucks, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
I do think Roderick's probably better than he's currently been performing, but actually I can see why not. I can understand why he's not performing. He has some brilliant cards, but he just can't get the engine going, really. He has nothing to make the engine work. Yeah, I mean, Starks, it's a shame, but Starks are just all over the place as well. Like, it's just mental how... I mean, we talk about this. Their oscillations are not severe. Most of them aren't that severe. Plus, as high as plus 15 maybe, dropping to maybe minus 20. But it's the fact that it's happening regularly and they just can't settle into a relatively stable position or a relatively stable point at all. They just keep... They either go, whoa, loads of wins, oh, loads of losers, oh, loads of wins, oh, loads of losers. There's just nothing. They've just got nothing stable going on with them. We are going to be doing.
We'll see what happens with Stark Heroes 3, right?
Yes,
of course.
Yeah.
But and obviously there's the balance coming up, right? Like the balance could change all sorts of things, right?
Of course it could.
Whenever it comes. But in their current state, they're one of the factions that's just like you're not winning a really big event. Unless it's like unless it's ELO handicapped. You're not winning a big event with them.
Yeah. I agree.
Starks, neutrals, Baratheons, you're not winning events with these things if it's big.
Yep. We are going to be doing a video on Starks because it's been highly requested. The problem is that me and Carlo, neither of us, play a huge amount of Starks ourselves. We play against quite a few Starks, or one Stark player a lot. But we are going to put something together as like potentially a collaboration of thoughts on Starks.
We'll try.
It is the faction.
Like I said, loads of people feel like they need some guidance with them, and I think that they're one of the most complex and difficult things to get right. So we'll try.
As a teaser, I think Rob in Bowman, Rickon in She-Bears, insert 8-point cavalry unit here. Your choice of Tully Cavaliers or Flayed Men. Make the right one.
I haven't heard the word Mormon veteran enough times yet, so
this is one of your two. So
this is wrong.
Then 2 wolves, Shaggy Dog and Greywind, and then 3 NCs. 8 activation list with cavalry, bowmen, and She-Bears. 3 of the units. You're probably taking Flayed Men over Tully Cav. Might be able to justify the Tully Cav with Rob's cards because the retreats are kind of useful. But the idea is to use Rob Wolves and Rob Bowman to do more work than they should do because his auto heal on retreat is stupid for Bowman. And just do something with that. It's 8 activations. You are running 2 wolves. The wolves are not nuclear missiles you release at the enemy and get them killed in the first 2 rounds of the game. They are activation holders. They are placement holders. They are blockers. They don't want to be anywhere near a fight until you want them in there. Something like that. Howland list, I've already got Howland list. I'm very happy with it. It's a 7 activation list, but it's the best you're going to get, in my opinion, with a 7 activation list that Howland can really put out. There are activation variants that I don't like, but it work. And there's probably a Brynden list there as well. I think worth investigating. Although, can we just take a minute? Not outright commander, but put Brynden the Blackfish might have a viable 8 activation build for free for Starks, and he literally doesn't give a shit about his own Tully affiliation. What the fuck? Yeah, semi-viable. I'm saying semi-viable.
I think what's interesting about them is that they're actually as good at 7 as they are at 8, which tells you a lot.
Yeah.
Basically, definitely. almost any faction that's as good at 7 as they are at 8 is in the problem. Is in the problem category because
found a good balance.
The problem is that like what you're really saying is that your 8 activation, which is where everybody else is really playing, yours is shit, and so you might as well play 7.
Yeah.
If there's not a distinct improvement for your faction in going from 7 to 8, it's probably because you don't have a 4-point activation, right? But in reality, it's just because you can't put together a good 8 is the way that I would see it. And therefore, you're having to play and do well with the really hard handicap of the fact that you are playing on 7 or playing with a bad 8. And so that's where what I see their problems as. Neutrals can't even really literally can't field an 8. I mean, they can just spam cutthroats, but neutrals play at 7. Which is just a problem.
I will go ahead and say neutrals have an 8 activation build, which isn't a meme, because it's 8 activations, and one of your activations is a goddamn fucking unit of flayed men, and as a result, that's not a meme, right? That it's as simple as that.
I mean, it is. It is by comparison to anybody else can do that.
Yeah,
everybody else can do that.
Yeah.
What your best thing, everybody else can do, plus have some better stuff, right?
Yeah.
When I feel Baratheons, my best stuff is a flayed men unit, but you know what? I've got some better NCUs to back it up. entirely questionable whether or not the deck's an improvement or not. Neutral's deck is pretty good, but it's not good enough to outweigh the fact that you got crap all NCUs, right? Like they did a number on most of the NCUs, and actually the ones that are still good in neutrals are the ones that don't have any neutral synergy.
The neutral deck in relation to the units is like they're kind of flipped. I actually think the neutral deck's very strong. The neutral deck is also like unbelievably polarizing in that some of the stuff will save your bacon and win your games. Like that's how good the cards are. They are that good. Some of the other cards will do nothing for you unless you're winning, and then they'll just win you a game. And it's like it completely depends on if you're in a winning state or a losing state, which ones you draw. I know you can say that's true of a lot of deck cards, but with neutrals even more so. If you're losing and it's not looking good, and you draw all these win more cards, yeah, you're fucking lost. You are just straight up gonna lose. If you're winning and you draw all these defensive cards, it's like, oh well, I can't push my advantage appropriately. The units kind of like the flip way around, right? In that they're mostly fine units. Like Stormcrow mercenaries are fine at a 5-point unit. They're not great, but they're not a 4-point unit. Blade Men, great. Hedge Knights, great. BBGs, fine. Even Blackguard are not terrible. It's just that you don't have the extreme. Ironically, the units need the extreme 4-point unit, and the deck needs the middle ground. It's like the polar opposites.
I'd agree with that.
And yeah, I agree. Neutrals just can't. And we talked about this a long time before. Neutrals are just never going to be stringing together good results on stats. Like people can win event with neutrals. We've seen it now. It's possible that you can string together your own results with the faction. People are not going to string across like meta-defining. I'm going to take neutrals and win massive events everywhere all the time because they just simply don't have the tools. And
there's murmurings. There's murmurings. I honestly can't remember if it was from people or from a chat or whatever. There's murmurings of 10-point neutral cap. There's always been murmurings of 10 point or 25% neutral cap. Do we believe?
You know what?
Do we believe A, that it'll happen, or B, that it'd actually be good if it did?
You know what? I'm of the opinion that it's probably a good thing. And when I say a good thing, I think it would be a good thing for them to do as a, dare I say it, alt list building format, because I think it would allow them to collect enough information from the community on whether or not, as it stands, it would be good for balance.
Oh, fuck off from the community. What?
I know they're not going to do it because of that exact reason. But the point is, like, you need to assess it. Is 25% now going to be a good thing? Not sure it is. It probably would be. With Flayed Men or Tycho, you can't run both, for example. Changes that. You can still run Baelish and Stormcrow Mercenaries, though. So there's a bit there. There's still some synergy with the neutrals you can take. We'd start talking about neutrals as packages, probably. But
10 is very limiting, right? Yes. Like 10's one unit, 2 NCUs. You know what I mean? Like a unit, and you can pick up an attachment here or there.
Maybe as
you pick up a really cheap unit, NCU. Like not really.
One NCU.
Unit. Yeah, if you go to the cheaper end of the units, the non-impactful ones, then you can have yourself one of the NCUs too. But
the only other way I can see them doing it is saying it's a 10-point neutral cap at the same time as a new release. Right? You'd be joking yourself.
It has to come with a rebalance.
Yeah, you'd be joking yourself that they'd change it in the middle of a patch to say, oh, you can only play 10 points now in the game, and expect people to be particularly happy with that because the game was never balanced with that in mind.
I do actually like Jesse. Yeah, I've heard people say it before, but Jesse's comment of like, you can, whether it's 10 points and 20 points, 25%, 50%, or just generally whatever, that neutral commanders bring that cap back up in some kind of way. They give you more ability. So actually, I'd like that to be more specific in terms of like, Roose Bolton, Ramsay Bolton, they allow you 10 points of Bolton units. Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, but you're getting quite specific there. It's probably easier to just make it, and you'd hope that their cards had enough synergy with it that they're the units that you want to pick, but it's hard.
So, this was another thing that, and this was not heard from Simon, not official at all. I think it may have appeared in chat one of these episodes back, and I don't dislike it. Right? I think it's a bit of a joke, but I don't dislike it. You pick a neutral commander, right? And then you can splash in up to 50% of your army from another faction, one faction of choice. So you'd be like neutrals plus Targ or neutrals plus Baratheon, and you can take those.
From a long time ago, we used to talk about neutrals in flip reverse, right?
Yes.
That like when neutrals come, they're neutrals plus somebody else instead of it being somebody else plus neutrals.
Yes.
That you reverse that way.
You'd have to use. I do think there's merit to that. It's a nightmare to balance, but I think there's real merit to that in some ways. Because if your argument is that the deck is the only limiting factor, because that's the only real difference, right? Is that it's the 20%. You can take a few more neutrals, sure, but it's 20% not neutrals, or 50%, sorry, not neutrals. If you're arguing that the neutral deck with some of these units is not good, too powerful, whatever, right? Then the neutral deck is either too strong, too weak, or flip reverse, the neutral deck isn't the issue. And it's the fact that other decks or other units are a problem in relation to neutrals units.
Yeah. I very much agree with Ilya, but like I don't think it will happen because of the situation that they've created. They've created a situation, not situation, but they've created a status quo, right? And it's a big change to the system will piss people off. But I always thought right from the start that any given unit, actually, I believe that any given unit at all, but specifically neutral units, I think that every unit could state what what they can be fielded by. Like, I actually don't think I think that the game would be in such a better state and like would be better. It might feel a bit complicated, but you know what I mean? Like you got online list builders, all that kind of stuff, right? It might be a bit too complicated for the new person. But
casuals.
Every unit, the casual or the new person to like understand exactly how list building works. Every unit could state what armies can field it, rather than it being attached to a specific army. So it's very simple with something like Bolton Cutthroats, right? If neutrals do or don't exist, neutrals don't need to exist under this guise at all. What you have is you have Bolton Cutthroats, and you say Bolton Cutthroats can be fielded by Lannisters, can be fielded by Starks, right? Lots of units, they only say one thing. But there also gets to be things that are like a bit more lore friendly, a bit more odd. You can have things like Free Folk Raiders, Free Folk, and Night's Watch. You know, like it happened. Do you know what I mean? Like, or it can be
Free Folk and Stark.
You can go much deeper. Yeah, you can go much deeper. It can be like, you know, this commander allows these units that you're not normally allowed to field. The Tyrell Renly situation entirely sorts it out, out. You know, you can start talking about Tyrell units that are fielded by Baratheons and Lannisters.
It becomes a list building tree, right?
Yes.
You pick your base deck. That allows you a selection of commanders from across the whole game, but of course some of them won't be allowed, some of them will. You then pick your commander, and then that unlocks units, and those units themselves may have certain restrictions on them. You could have, for example, you could have something really like unique where if you're running this particular unit, that locks out this. For example, probably wouldn't need to do that very often. I can't think of any scenarios off the top of my head, but it gives you the opportunity to do that at least.
Hey, Locabri, why don't you do it, mate? Because it's way too complex. It'll never happen. Like if we're being realistic, it's probably too complex for the game itself and the way the game wants to be spread, and it's too complex for the beginner. It's too complex a system to implement for all but people who are really dedicated to the game. Which then suddenly, just because his name's there in chat, the kind of thing that Local Breed could put together.
Do you know actually who I think would do a good job of
it? Shane, maybe?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Big man Shane, Board Man Gaming. It's the kind of thing that he already does with his scenarios a little bit. I think he would probably make it really work. And he's got the right head on him to make it a combination of lore friendly. And he probably wouldn't do it based on power level. That's the point. He wouldn't do it based on power level. The point where it probably wouldn't be balanced. But then he would look at it and go, right, how can I make this balanced a little bit? And if you're going to do it this way, you've got to do it lore friendly first. And then the balance stems from that. And you go, right, well, here's the lore friendly things and affiliations and all the connections. Now, how do we balance some of those connections? Oh, but running Bolton Buster's girl with this particular attachment from this particular army is really strong. You go, well, clearly that attachment's a bit too good then. Just nerf that attachment, or we'll nerf the unit. So, yeah.
I agree with Datalink that I do really like the new Targaryen. Also, cards specific, 4 cards to a commander, remove 1 from the deck. Loads of people have said it. It would be the ideal neutral. It would be the ideal neutral commander solution.
You can make it 5 or 6 cards, for fuck's sake. That's the thing. You could make it even more. The fact that it's none is ridiculous.
But yeah, that's the issue with neutrals. I think that I think that it'd be good for the game's health. I think it'd be good for the game's health if they moved to a 25% system. 25% neutral limit.
I can see it.
But that goes back to this thing that I think that people are way more accepting and way happier to see like a pure army across the table from them rather than neutral hybrid. They don't like to see everything having flayed men plus Tycho in. They don't want to see the faction purity be watered down by neutrals.
Well, I think the big issue as well is that units that fulfill the same role, like lore-wise, I don't think people would be that fussed if flayed men were running Starks or like cutthroats are running Starks that often. But it's fucking weird when people are like, oh yeah, so I wanted an 8-point cavalry unit that was really good on the charge, so I took flayed men over Tully Cavaliers. And you're like, fuck? You've got Lance Cavalry and you're taking that instead? Like, it's disjointed, the feel of what they're trying to provide. I want a sustained cavalry unit that's going to do me really well in Baratheons. So I'm going to take my 8-point cavalry unit and call it Bolton Flayed Men rather than Champions of the Stag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jesse's right, actually. Golden Company could be. We'll see what happens. Like, they could be the new. They could be the new first 15 points of neutrals that every faction spends, or they could be somehow just right to round out the neutral faction and give it options and suddenly make it viable.
Well, we're going to see war
Surely
elephants.
They don't have a 4-point combat unit.
We're going to see war elephants, right? The Golden Company war elephant. And if that is a neutral tag, war elephant, as someone who runs mammoths, okay, if it's the same power level as mammoths, I don't really give a fuck. But like, if that's too strong or if that's too weak, right? Too weak, shit, no one will talk about it, who cares? Too strong? You break the game overnight. We saw, just imagine this. Imagine we saw 1.6 mammoths available to literally every faction. The game would have been an absolute fucking joke. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that potentially happening if they fuck it up.
Yeah, it is nervous times with everybody should be a little bit nervous every time there's a new huge neutral release, because its ramifications are so wide on the balance. They're the most difficult thing to get right, and so far the thing that they've shown the least consistency with, the most likely thing for them to get wrong, has been monsters. Right, like again and again we've seen them be under or overpowered. which is why I'm so pleased that Mag and 1-1 seem just the low side of playable, right? Like, but Golden Company, we will find out.
We will indeed. Carlo, Baratheons. How them?
They're neutrals by a different name. They're neutrals with better NCUs and better commanders.
This feels like a very appropriate time for me to point out something, Carlo, which is if you go to my profile, you'll see that little Baratheon badge there.
Good for you, mate.
Yeah. Shall I go to your profile?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at your profile. Where are we? Z4 Carlo. Oh look, it's right there on the screen for. Not a Baratheon badge.
No, no, I'm not close at all.
No, but
no, I don't pretend to be.
But you did obviously take. If anyone doesn't know,
3 little cups there, Mickey.
There are 3 little cups.
If we're gonna do personal jibes.
All right. Attend the LGT next time, you loser. Yeah, you did obviously play Baratheons this weekend and won a small event. Well, 16-player event, 14-player event really, in Liverpool. So talk about that in a second. But Baratheons, obviously, I think the pair of us have now got quite a lot of experience playing them in terms of different guises of the builds, and certainly list building. It's still, anyone who's not heard us say this will say it again. And I'm pretty sure I'm putting words in Carlo's mouth here that he'll agree with, hopefully. We both find it absolutely miserable to build Baratheon lists. I actually don't find it miserable playing them. It's really weird. I don't dislike playing Baratheons on the field. Fuck me, building lists feels shite.
Yeah, I'd agree.
If you're theory crafting Baratheons all the time, my actual best advice to you is stop. Don't theory craft Baratheons. Go away, theory craft another faction, then come back, make a Baratheon list quickly, thinking, "Oh, I think this is going to work," and just play it. The more time you spend thinking about Baratheons, literally the sadder you get. It's not worth it.
I made a literal last-minute change to my list, which I was very pleased about. I swapped out. Basically, I swapped out Stormcrow Archers for Bottom Bastard Girls in the Loras list at the very last minute. I was very pleased at how it worked out. I was actually pretty happy with the Bottom Bastard Girls. But I had never played the list, which I took to the tournament before. I just went on gut feel on how I felt. I didn't feel happy putting together a 7 activation list, particularly one that was very slow. But it did fine for me. I went through for Terra. Yeah, I went through the pain of getting to 8 activations with Andrew. With Andrew, of all people,
which I think is the correct 8 activation list to go for. Gonna do it?
No, yeah. If to Terra, my 8 activation was with double Dragonstone Nobles. That's the only reason why I went for Andrew, because
synergizes
because his sacrifice 2 wounds card is. I mean, it's a silly meme strat play, but you know what? It worked. It did actually work.
Yep.
I managed to get my opponent to let me Sentinel into them. Then I played it. So I sacrificed 2 wounds to gain Vicious, which was not worth anything, right? Did some attacks. Then I activated straight away, retreated out of combat, and charged back in, this time gaining 4 automatic hits. And they were both very strong. They were both very powerful. They can fight other 4-point units, basically. But unlike a lot of 4-point units, unlike a 12 wound 4-point unit, they're always at risk of just like dying any given moment. They're always they can't really fight up. Like, in my opinion, they can do some damage to like a 5-point unit or something like that. But like, if you're a really expensive unit, you just can't fight them. If you're a middle range unit, you're probably going to lose. So they're not a good 4-point unit because they're really, really always on the verge of a bad roll away from dying. Sundering and invulnerable tokens means you're just dead. But the list was enjoyable enough to play at 8 activations. And I mostly did really, really well with Loras. Actually, I just played Loras again and again and again. But Loras really is me playing one card, Overgrowth, and Flayed Men. Like the reality of how Baratheon it is not really. It's not really Baratheon. It's leaning very heavily on other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I played Loras. Loras is borderline one of Baratheon's best commanders. I don't know if he's the highest rated at the moment, but he's certainly been up there with the highest rated stuff.
Sure he is.
And Overgrowth, it's the card you play it for. Don't get me wrong, like, Growing Strong is a nice little heal thing that's got a fairly simple trigger to stick out, and it's something, but it's not what you're playing Loras for. You're playing Loras for Overgrowth. The Love by the Small Folk is very weird, like an opposite Warcry. But it's just not good.
Neither of them. Nah, I mean, like, my opinion of that deck is Overgrowth is 100% what I'm digging for at the start of the game. Love by the Small Folk, Growing Strong, actually believe them as discard fodder. If I don't play them instantly, they're gone, in my opinion. If you go down, I actually quite like Baratheon Justice as a card, but I won't particularly hold it. Stag's Wit's a great card. Ours is the Fury is a great card. And then off the top of my head, everything else. Oath of Duty, obviously, you play. Final Strike, very important cards. So basically, Final Strike, Ours is the Fury, and Growth are the 3 cards which I'm looking for. I'm playing Eldon very heavily, so I'm willing to put Stag's Wit and Baratheon Justice back in my deck. I'm very happy to put them back in my deck with the Eldon reshuffle. Everything else, I'm just discarding. Like, they're just worthless. Like, honestly, they're just straight up worthless. Not worth having. Sustained Assault, you can meet all of its very stringent requirements, and it's still a bad card. It still does nothing for you.
I think, can I just point out, it's fucking mental that this card is like it has value in the sustain game. It has value with cavalry. It has value with so many things that the Baratheons offer. Like, so many things. And the best part of this card is the fucking vulnerable token that it may get to put out. And yet, in theory, it should have value with so many things. And it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, it's just terrible. I enjoy the card. I like playing it. But yeah, you're right. If it's in my card, if it's in my hand, and I got the opportunity to throw it away, I'm gonna rip it up. I'm not gonna throw it away. Jesus.
My advice to you, if you want to be better with Baratheons, if you're struggling with Baratheons, is pretty much that. Like, I think that's relatively commander independent. Outside of Final Strike and Hours of the Fury, Stag Wit and Baratheon Justice I rate highly enough to hold on to. But basically, those 2 cards are the only cards that you care about in your entire deck. Commanders may or may not add extra value, and you want to be bringing a commander who brings at least 1 or 2 extra value cards into there to, like, double the good cards in your deck. Everything else, discard it continuously. I don't even care if you're about.
Duty is legitimately not discarded because the trigger is impossibly easy to meet.
Yeah, you just play it. Obviously, don't discard cards.
But yeah, but
you
would discard it, right? You would discard it if the trigger wasn't easy to meet, 100% of the time.
Yeah. Like, it wouldn't, like, if I had to wait to pass a morale test, even, for example, to put it on, no, I'd discard that. Like, yeah, I'd bin it because it's not worth the effect that it gives. Once you see the faction in that way, I think that it's playable. It's playable.
The thing is it's a bit of a statement on you as a player, I guess. But I've played all the Baratheon stuff, right? I've played it, and some of the stuff I did struggle with more so than others. Some of the stuff I put together and I was running builds, and I was like running it, and I thought, this feels fine. Like, this actually feels on the field fine, as long as I stick to some of the tenets like we just talked about there. I'm going to throw away these cards. Stag's Wit, yeah, I'm going to keep that against the Lannister player. Watch him as he weakens my army, and then I play this card and I weaken the entire force and just laugh at him. You know, there are things you can definitely do. It's just that the list building shit, and you know that you're in a disadvantage straight away. But also, and I don't know how you found this, Carlo, I feel that you have to play into the disadvantage. You can't go into the game saying, look, I'm equal activations or I'm higher activations than you, so I'm going to control it this way. I am going to make moves where you have to respond in the right way, aggressively, doing the right thing. And if I do this enough, you will make errors, and because you're making errors, I can then capitalize on them, rather than sitting back waiting, making for opponent to make errors by not actually presenting them with a problem. I don't know if you found that as well. You at least have to throw something and say, how do you deal with this? And if they know how to deal with everything, then you're probably going to lose. But if you don't present them with that question to start with, then they're definitely going to find it hard.
I mean, I was very, very pleased to win the tournament with Baratheons, right? Like, I actually, like, I was really happy. I was really, really happy to win that event. Because I didn't think that I would. Like, any given game that I play, like, I kind of think I'm going to win. But to be able to do it 5 times across a tournament is a different thing. You have to think that you're going to win a tournament, you have to really, really consistently think that you're going to win every game. Like, you have to just be like, your thought process has to be not, I can win this game. Thought process is, I can win every game. Right. And I definitely didn't think that, right? Mm-hmm. I did not think I can win every game with Baratheons. I was helped a lot in that, it was ever so slightly, the tournament was branded as a social event, and it was a very social event. It was a really, really good event. It also had a number of recognizable top UK players there, right? So, like, it wasn't a casual week event, but it was socially kind of directed, which means that you can possibly put a little bit of asterisks over it. Like we talked a little bit a while ago about how the Tane was the first Baratheon player that I considered to have won a tournament which didn't have an asterisk over it. It wasn't an ELO tournament, and it wasn't having like loads of list bans in or anything like that. This tournament had no bans, but it did have self-limitation. I think that a lot of players, I would put myself in the category of bringing a weak faction with the best lists that I could possibly put together. There are other people who brought better factions with some self-limitation in terms of not bringing the very best things within that faction. And then there are people bringing, like as I spoke about, Aaron came 5th, did very, very well with starter set only Greyjoys. This is very, very good people playing not tournament caliber lists, not GT winning lists, not the best stuff that can be fielded in the game, right? I'm in no doubt in my mind that if somebody had brought Offal, that I could have beaten it. Like, I couldn't. So I was very, very pleased to be able to win, because there were still some very strong players and some very strong lists. There are still 2 Night's Watch players, 2 Targaryen players. There is a Mother of Dragons who didn't get played, but they are both fielding Khal Drogo, and a whole mix of other stuff. I'm actually very lucky in that I probably Loras and Baratheons in general very weak to high panic Lannisters, and there was only one Lannister player, which is very favourable to me. That part is a bit of luck. I'm probably better off fighting into like a Jon melee heavy Night's Watch army than I am fighting into a very panic heavy Lannister army, right? Even though the Jon list is very, very powerful. The lists that I faced were definitely in the category of like, this is frustratingly strong, but in the same way that like Loras himself and Baratheons can be considered frustratingly strong, right? Like high levels of healing, high levels of defensiveness, some high levels of damage here and there, that kind of stuff. Whereas Night's Watch, when they put out absolutely everything they can, it's unfair in other ways. It's like they have unfair activations, they have unfair control of the game, in my opinion. I think that I think that the tournament was really good. I've kind of like gone on a whole segue that I wasn't really sure what the original kind of discussion was, other than I'm pleased to have won. I don't think that it's a statement at all that Baratheons can win against the toughest stuff, because I will not tell you that I played the toughest stuff. I played good players playing the fairer end of the more powerful factions.
It felt, and this is not a statement at all on what people were bringing, but I felt that this event was what ELO was trying to produce in an event. In some ways, I feel like people brought what they thought they could win with and would enjoy playing, not what they thought was necessarily the strongest thing in the game, or vice versa. People bringing the weakest thing in the game because it's like, oh, if I take the weakest thing and I win, I get more points. You know, they're taking what they believe is what they want to take because they'll enjoy it, but also that they think it's actually quite good.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So I think this is like, it's not an ELO event, but it's an ELO event in
it's achieved. You're right. It achieved exactly what ELO would like to achieve, which is that people are just playing things that they want to play. Right? I wanted to play Baratheons. I didn't think that they gave me the best chance to win at all, but I wanted to play Baratheons, so I played Baratheons. You know, Kieran, Scadman, Colin, Colco, both wanted to play Night's Watch, and specifically Scadman. He wants to play Jon, right? Like he really just loves playing Jon. Yeah. Like, spoke to him a bit. He played Jon and Benjen. I don't think he ever played Benjen in the end. He played Jon 5 times over. And we talked a little bit about him going to the Scottish GT, and you know, if it's not, you know, like giving away strategies or anything like that. He mentioned that come the Scottish GT, he'll probably run double Jon, right? Because he just wants to play Jon.
Yeah.
Carl, probably more on the end of was limiting himself away from Offal specifically. Also, didn't necessarily play the strongest possible things that he could field. He wanted to field some of the more interesting new stuff, particularly from Night's Watch Heroes 2. Fielded Cold Hands, both as an attachment and as a solo in his 2 different lists. So just having a bit more of an experimentation there. Aaron plays tons and tons of factions, bringing Greyjoys this time, and again limited very heavily in terms of what he had. Gregor's normally a long-time Lannister player playing Free Folk this time. Tim was there with new, absolutely impeccably painted Starks as always, which is nice to see. And Alan Technic actually came up, submarined up into second, and I know he was really, really pleased to do so. Done really, really well with Khal Drogo. Embarrassed him, you know what I mean? He's decided not to bring MOD. Lee's in the chat.
He didn't run
Lee played mammoths and giants very heavily, possibly in like the majority of his games in the end. And look to be having a lot of fun with it. So it was really interesting. I think that it was a great event in terms of variety of lists, variety of factions. If anything, actually, it was just way heavily skewed into Baratheons. I didn't meet any of them in the end, but there was tons of really well-known players from online and from the UK scene, and really enjoyable.
Yeah, that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about making sure that the factions that we see and players that we see obviously get fostered, and communities get fostered as well, which is fantastic. Yeah, I mean stats. I mean, for what anyone who doesn't know, yeah, sadness. The stats page is working, by the way, for tournaments, so you can now look at the statistics.
I wasn't sure if you had put it up there.
I was going to put it up here. So feel free to look at the statistics of any event and see some interesting things and pull downs from what you've seen there. It is still interesting, and this is again no comment on the event, but it is still interesting to see Night's Watch did still win the majority of their games. Now, obviously, we know Kolko is a very strong player. We know Scadman, spoke about Scadman before. He is a player who has grown in strength since originally coming into like playing on the UK online scene. Check out Scadman's blog if you haven't already. He'll no doubt put something up about the weekend, hopefully. Do it, Scadman. But yeah, like players like that are now playing a lot of Night's Watch, and they're doing well with them. So it is interesting, still to see them up there though. And if you look at this list, it's kind of what I would expect, generally speaking, outside of the Greyjoys, perhaps. Neutrals weren't there, okay, whatever. But Night's Watch at the top, Targaryen second, and then you've got Stark, Baratheon, Lannister, Freefolk, Greyjoy. Now, Freefolk, people weren't running, and this is what I've talked about for a long time. People don't run those meta lists of Freefolk. People experiment with the giants and things like this. Don't be wrong, man. Fun. They are fun. I will straight up say sometimes Freefolk are just fun to play. But there's a significant difference between fun and good. They are not the same. And I'm absolutely overjoyed that you love playing with Mammothly. It was probably a great laugh. But like you saw, you probably realised that
It was interesting, actually. Lee was talking about how he preferred them a lot more when he used them as a combat unit and never bothered to trample.
Yeah. They have a rule, which I actually agree. You use the trample for specific scenarios where you need to finish a unit off on 1 health that is just like hardened. Fuck it, I'll run over the top of it. It's easier. But yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so the stats page, is back. I didn't know it's actually been back over a week. I didn't know if you kind of put it up last week. It tells you a little bit about the event in terms of the entrants, commanders which are used, the win rates of commanders. You can look at the commanders and the factions, how they've done across the whole event, which actually, does bring up some things. It shows why, for example, Night's Watch didn't win this event, but the Night's Watch as a faction had the highest win rate over the event. And, Baratheons did win the event, but had a less than average winning once you take all the Baratheon players together, which is why this event didn't improve the rankings of Baratheons, right? Yeah. This is the way the site works. It doesn't care who's winning tournaments specifically. It cares about the total overview of all the commanders, all the faction games as a total thing, total sum. So yeah, go have a look at that. I'd genuinely forgotten how useful and interesting this page was. So go back and have a look at some old tournaments, guys. If you're interested, go have an old look at the LGT or any other big events or the big online events that happened. You might kind of learn something new about it. It tells you how many players there are. It also tells you the average strength of all the players put together, so you can get a feel for the importance of the players themselves. That's one of the things that I've always been trying to use stats for, and one of the reasons why player rankings exist is not for that direct thing. It's to be able to give value to really well-known, successful players playing together in smaller tournaments. Should be given as much value as just 50 people who none of whom have shown previous success. Isn't necessarily a more important event than when we run something like Faction Masters or just generically the 2020 Masters, where we get literally the best players together. It helps us kind of give value to how strong an event is. That's not just how many people entered, but that's what the event categorization actually comes to. It's kind of a calculation based on how many people have played, multiplied in, obviously, as always with me, an overly complex manner, what the average player rating is. So you can run a small event with very high player ratings, and you will get a feel for how strong the event is by what the categorization it comes up with is.
Of course, big events doesn't mean big events are bad by any stretch. Of course, big events are very important for growing communities and things like that. Fantastically important. But I agree. Sometimes just because there's a lot of people doesn't mean that it's a showing of competitive skill. I think that's the difference, really. Yeah. Yes, Terrano. It is beautiful when a Tormund overrun comes off and you get to play all of the bullshit. I played a game where I did it once, and I was like, I literally did it boom, 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 and my opponent was just like, "Fuck this, game over." But that was also the same game. You were there, right? You saw it when I pulled off the combo with Tormund, and I killed the first unit, and he Great John last standed me. And he put my Dan put my my Spearwife unit with Tormund onto like 1 health from a last stand because I obliterated him and he played all the Berserker tactics cards and everything. Just absolutely obliterated me back, but I'm like, still got overrun. I'm charging into your bowman, and with 1 rank Spearwife just massacred the bowman. That was sad. Anyway, should we have a quick look at the other events?
Yeah, sure. That was a huge segue into Ribble Rumble, which obviously I went to, and so that's why we kind of like talked about it. I enjoyed it a lot. Hopefully, it'll come back next year. It was capped at 16 players. Otherwise, I do believe there would have been a few more. Probably would have been about a 20-player event. But it was really good to play 5 rounds over 2 days. Quite a relaxed schedule. That's actually really my preferred schedule rather than 4 on 1 day. It makes things like really pressured and hectic. It was still enough to give me a really bad headache. Playing 3 games in 1 day of a tournament still gives me a headache on the Saturday night. But during that time, we totally, was ignoring the chat going on, which is, should Mr. J play, and what faction should he play?
What faction? I mean, I would say. Go on. What do you think I should suggest, Carlo?
Well, the problem is that I actually think that all the factions are very playable. Obviously, if you're thinking of playing Lancers or Starks, then you should wait for the starter sets that are coming out, in my opinion. Outside of that,
if you're limited by funds a little bit, I wouldn't suggest Free Folk initially. You can have some fun with it. The Free Folk starter deck is fun. The base deck, the starter set is fun. But I would say you'd probably very quickly want to buy expansion units, like very quickly. So I wouldn't suggest Free Folk, although, and this is nothing to do with me being a Free Folk player, I do think you will have most fun with Free Folk as a faction, because the Free Folk deck is fun. All right, calm down. I actually think one of the best ones to start.
Yeah, don't play neutrals.
Honestly,
because they're not a faction.
Honestly, one of the best starter sets to probably buy is Night's Watch.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, if you're limited by funds, if you want an army which plays out the box straight away in a way that you expect it to,
and ridiculously OP or anything like that.
Yeah, out the starter box, it's not incredibly weak. It's probably the strongest starter set, although questionable that Targs are also in that bracket too. And I would also give an almost equal shout out to Targs in terms of the starter set now of Drogo or Jorah, Screamers, Veterans, and Outriders are a very complete Dothraki army. So I'd honestly say, Mr. J, you have to be drawn to the faction in general. But my ones would be that if you're drawn to any of Night's Watch, then it's got a great starter set. If you're drawn to the Targaryens, they have a great starter set and are also very, very budget friendly. they're also both powerful enough to say, like, you're not going to regret picking them up unless maybe people start rolling their eyes and tutting at you for playing Night's Watch. But really, like, that's not really fair. Then Elite Teddy's right. If you are in the UK, I did actually know, and I wasn't sure if you're in the UK, but you can pick up a Night's Watch starter set for 36 quid, which is actually like ludicrous. That's the price of like a unit, and it has 4 units in it.
And
other than that, I think the Greyjoys, like, there's too many people on the Greyjoy bandwagon, but they're a great army. So, and they've got great sculpts.
Your
so
problem
you could
is in the UK,
Greyjoys.
You're not going to be able to source the stuff you want to play with. Like, it's a good starter set, but like you want to expand. Maybe if you enjoy the game, you might want to expand quite quickly. You won't have the option to expand. So if you'd have asked us in 6 months, in theory, which faction to pick, I would probably say Greyjoys. But yeah, it's just not really a thing to do at the moment.
Unless you want to join the hordes of raving fanatics that are the Baratheon fan base, I would say
avoid
Baratheons
like the plague.
Avoid them, only not like because they're a little bit weak, but actually just because there are tons and tons and tons of very avid Baratheon players, and if you're just gonna be like kind of semi into Baratheons, you might as well just go for a different faction because they're already really overrepresented.
Yeah.
Starks and Lannisters should both be kind of like, don't really bother getting the current whole box base game right now.
I will say, if you
don't know how long you have to wait.
If you can pick up the base game for cheap, like the full base set which has Lannisters and Starks in it, or is it 100 and something quid? I think is what it was retail at originally. You might be able to pick it up secondhand for less than £100, and you get 2 full armies. The starter set is by no means bad value. It's still one of the best boxes you can get, the starter combined. But yeah, I mean, if Night's Watch have piqued your interest,
then honestly, like, as a complete starter set, it plays the way Night's Watch might be expected to play. It has your big characters, Jon, Jayor, Aemon. You got interesting units. If you want to play Night's Watch hyper competitively, what's interesting is that by the time you play them hyper competitively, you field almost none of those units. But if you want to play hyper competitively, then that's actually true of so many armies that you would need to have like totally different things. What's good about Night's Watch is that is a very good
usable
army out of the box, and you'd go quite far with it.
It actually has theme as well, in that you feel like you're probably going to pick Jon as a commander, let's face it, not because he's the best, but because everyone knows who Jon is. Jon is a cool guy. It's a cool faction to play. You're probably going to play Jon. You'll get Ghost. You get to play the thematic stuff. You pick up this is actually the biggest criticism of the Baratheon starter. You pick up the Baratheon starter, and it's like, I have my army with Stannis as my commander, or I have my army with with Renly as my commander.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not. There's no theme in the base box. It's kind of the
Alistair Florent and Shira Errol, because they've gone for non-affiliated characters, are so uninteresting. But yeah, Mr. J, honestly, genuinely go and look at Titan Games. 36 quid for a new Night's Watch starter set right now. It honestly couldn't be an easier way to test the waters. The only thing I would say is, like, don't let people put you off if you turn up with Night's Watch. And they say, and like they roll their eyes or anything like that. Like, really, like, just go play, enjoy it. They're a great army. Unless you're coming back with until you're fielding 2-3 units of conscripts plus a load of relentless and some really, really nasty character combos, you're just playing the same game that everybody else is playing. So don't worry about it.
Let us know where you're based as well, if need be, Mr. J, whereabouts in the UK, because I'm sure people on here, or we can hook you up with people in the area. We know a lot of people in the UK, so we can definitely hook you up with people who may or may not be in your area, at least people in the same region, at least. Cool. There were other events run. I realised we've gone over our 2 hour time limit.
Our 2-hour allotment.
I know, our 2 hour allotment. I say it's another time limit. We're not actually time limited. We could go for a 24-hour non-charity stream, just 24-hour stream. We could do 48 streams.
Speaking of which, Scadman played him at the weekend. Really, I also didn't give a shout out to Scadman. We went 10-all in the second to last game. Scadman got submarined into third place by Alan. Was just as deserving to actually win the entire event, particularly after he went on and beat Carl in the Night's Watch mirror. So really well done to him. He is having he's doing a 24-hour continuous play of a Song of Ice and Fire charity event at some point in March. I actually forget.
March, right.
We'll put some links up as soon as we get them off him, or like some kind of thing.
We'll give him a shout.
Hopefully I'll be able to put it on the site. He's a madman. He loves song, and he also does some really great work. So, hopefully sometime soon we'll get links for anybody who wants to go and support his 24-hour continuous play charity event, where people will come and play him in 2-hour slots, and he will just play song for a very, very long time, which is for a good cause.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And Scad is a lovely.
He is
really nice guy. All right then, we have had other events play out. I'll quickly run through them. I'm not going to spend a long time on this, guys. We can't spend a long time looking at lists and things. But we have got Trash Banner Bats, who is a name that people have heard of, perhaps from the US scene. He is, West Coast Bannerman style, all West Coast. Yeah, of course. I had to think about that. Jesus Christ. One of the West Coast players. But he took a win with Targaryens, running Mother Dragon's Khal Drogo. Slightly different take on the Drogo lists that we've seen. Have a little look at them on the site if you want to. The interesting thing, yeah, that was it. The Mother Dragon's list ran Azaro, Zoe, and Daxos, which you simply don't see. There you go. There's something a bit interesting. But everything else is fairly similar, straightforward. So check that event out. That was the Hobby Badger. I always get the name wrong. Event in California. We also had an event in the Netherlands run by the guys from the Rotterdam White Scars. A massive shout out to Flixie and the guys over there. And that was Battle for White Harbour 3, right? 13-14 player event, won by Targaryens with a Grey Worm commander and a different take on the Drogo that we normally see. I actually do recommend spending some time looking at these lists. The Grey Worm list is something kind of similar to what people may have seen before Grey Worm, but he does go down the non-Unsullied route, which is interesting. The Drogo list is just kind of like traditional Blood Riders and Flayed Men, and then he just filled it up with weird stuff. It's a bit of an interesting list. Check them out, obviously. But obviously, kudos to
D1 also joint unbeaten.
Yep.
But beaten on secondary points.
Yeah, and that's him and his brother. Brother going over from Belgium to the Netherlands to play. And yeah, kudos to DuPont there. Not to ones.
As you said in chat, some Barras doing well in that as well.
Yes.
Coming in third.
Well, Flixie, Joran himself, did really
double
well
Stannis. Stannis rightful heir. Stannis one true king. Oof.
He's a Chad Stannerman.
He is. So, way more than me. I'm but a Renly boy.
You are. Just
He says, wearing his cult Renly shirt, as somebody put it earlier. The cult of Baratheon.
And we did have other events run. I don't know if they've been signed off yet, so we'll have a little.
Yeah, I think I went and signed them all off.
Good.
So they should all be in the Hall of the Champions.
So we had Battle Royale Harbour, War of the Nine Penny Kings. That was the Russian event. I'm not going to say much on this simply because I can't read Russian, as we probably know by now. But it was run by Evgeny Chi, who running his Night's Watch. Classic.
I think there was some restrictions, maybe off the top of my head. I think there's like Offal bans. I think there's relentless changes.
They have the restrictions in English, so well done for them. Thank you. But loads of different restrictions there. The kind of what I think has become the standard restrictions. Yeah, fairly standard.
Yeah. One conscript, one watch captain. Yeah.
So that was the War of the Ninepenny
Still
Kings.
Still wins.
Still wins. We also had this one in Germany, which I think went ahead.
Oh yeah, Yannick won. Yannick played. Yannick still plays.
As it turns out,
I haven't seen Yannick in a long time.
I've spoken to him recently. But yeah, Yannick with his Lannisters, winning a 3-round event there.
And that Flab, who's in chat now at the moment,
just joined
there as well with his Night's Watch, doing pretty well.
Cut's in there as well. Cut plays a lot of Baratheons. Cool. So yes, that was that event. We also had Rimble Rumble, obviously, and we also had, and I'll finish on that one. We had an event in Helsinki in Suomi. Appreciate the picture for this one. Did you see this picture before?
Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah,
great picture, isn't it? So this is their Helsinki event run by a guy called Psych.
ELO tournament.
Yep, ELO event. But Starks, which is great to see. A Stark winner of an ELO event. Kudos, mad kudos. Starks are not the weakest things to pick up in the list. Typically you see Baratheon players doing well. Greyjoys have done before, but yeah, Starks winning an ELO event is always nice to see. I think they're a good pick. So kudos there again to the Finnish community who use the site randomly quite a lot.
Yeah. It's super interesting event, which just total aside that I never thought about. I'm not 100% that he won by a good 3 points.
Oh yeah.
But not actually 100% he definitely won the tournament, because they did something very interesting in there. On the first page, it says you score tournament points for having a painted army. So I don't know if they went and then also added 1 TP for a fully painted army and based. That's interesting. It's very much like the 40k comp system. The 40k comp system actually gives the first 10 victory points of the game itself for your army being painted. I wouldn't say I'm pro it, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Definitely makes you think about it. We spoke about it before, I think, for the week. It certainly brings a different spin on the event. We've obviously talked about Rimble Rumble. Obviously, massive shout out to Brian McGonaghy and Gregors, who often do a lot of the running down there for Just Play and like that whole Element Games area in the like Manchester / Liverpool. Kind of get mashed together quite a lot. And then finally, we had an event in Valencia. Yet again, the Spanish were at it. And is it any surprise if you were to guess a Spanish event that I've been told
about? With his Greyjoys.
Mikel with his Greyjoys, absolute classic. It's becoming a bit of a meme already. I think he needs to let someone else play and or win. But Mikel there, winning his Greyjoys. Yep.
Interesting. I think the Targs and Night's Watcher came second. I think they draw in their first game, right? If you have a look at their results, I think they play each other and draw, which then totally leaves the door open for Miguel to play neither of them throughout the entire tournament and take the win off them. But still, when you can do it reliably, when you can do it repeatedly, you're just showing that you're a really, really good player. And Miguel really deserves his really high rating, and he reserves that golden little badge next to his Greyjoy banner, which says, "I am a true master of this faction."
Yeah, no, Mikel deserves. I mean, Mikel's been in the top 10 for a long time now in the rankings. There's a reason he's been there for so long. But it wouldn't be a week without our favourite section, Cool Mini or Not.
Yeah.
Except bad news. I've got no minis.
You've lost the pictures. You got no minis?
No minis. No one sent me Cool Mini or Not this week.
Aww.
I am absolutely heartbroken. But instead, right, for this week only, because no one's got some cool things they've painted up, clearly. For this week only, we get to have Cool Tournament or Not. Mikel did send me some pictures of the event in Valencia as a like payment. So we're just going to scan through them. There's not really much to say. It is just an event, but it is fantastic to see people shouting about and talking about events happening all over.
Yeah.
I am a bit disappointed because if you can see on this image here, that Greyjoy army looks kind of unpainted. So if that's Mikel's Greyjoys, It might not be. It might. There was another Greyjoy player.
There's another Greyjoy player.
I
hope they're not giving up tournament points for painted armies, Mikhail.
If that's your unpainted, you can't win events this often with Greyjoys or play a lot with Greyjoys and have an unpainted army. You should be disappointed. I hope it's not you, but you should still feel disappointed.
Come on, Mickey. Who are you painting shaming?
Like, I've got a fully painted free folk army. Have you got a fully painted Baratheon army?
You are the free folk player, and you don't have like one painted free folk unit.
I have a full army. I think you'll find it might not be based, but they're painted. Yeah. Anyway, they are yours. Oh my god, I'm gone. That's it.
Carton says that En route to the Citadel's finished as well. Might have to look next week. Is it in the ended results or is it still?
No, you might. Oh, because it'd be way far down, right? Because it started.
Old previous end date must have been. Oh no! You should be able to find it in Hall of Champions.
It's not in the Hall of Champions, I don't think. We'll double check.
It will be.
Called
En route to the Citadel.
Decipher. Yeah, Decipher. I thought that ended last week. Did I imagine that?
30-player event
last week. I might have been imagining that. Yeah. So Decipher won that. I think that one ended last week though. Yeah. Oh well, it did end though. So there's a shout out again to Decipher for winning the first of the big French events that are happening. We will obviously catch up a little bit more with the French scene. I'm hoping to get one of the guys in from France to talk about the event as a whole and give a bit more light to it to the rest of the community. Going back to our images, here's some more nice pictures. Fully painted Night's Watch list there, by the way. Pretty much fully painted anyway. So fully painted unit. Kudos. Someone handing someone a weirwood.
0 out of 10. Great event.
Can I just point out there's something suspicious with this picture?
Go on.
That man has his hand out in a Greyjoy fashion.
Yeah, I only just noticed. I was too drawn in by the Greyjoy shirt just next to him that kept drawing my eyes. So
I think this is a point, and we really should end on this note. You see this this thing here? That's a phallus. It's not a real penis. But yeah, it sounds like they've got a great event, and I will point out their hobby space looks amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Anyway, so yeah, thanks a lot, Mikhail, for that. Yeah, I think this week
that's like 5 events, which is really brilliant. I don't know whether or not the stats community is growing or the song community, like the actual song tournament community, is growing. But either way, the stats tournament weekly amount is in a really good, healthy place. 5, 6 in a week. Next weekend, there's 5 or 6. There's too many for us to go through at this point, which is why Mickey's going to start posting them every day instead on Facebook and start annoying everybody with that.
We will be doing focuses, obviously, on Tourney Ground. That's what we're here for. Certainly events that we attend, we can give you much better insight. And if I get photos like that, of course, I'm going to share them with you guys. But yeah, we're not going to go through in details lists and things like that. The options, the things are there available for you to look at, and we'll be posting them up there simply because it's too much. One thing we didn't talk about.
While you're in the chat, are the guys from Rotterdam, are you heading over to Always Winter? Obviously, a lot of the guys in the UK at the weekend, we were talking about whether or not people will be over Scotland GT. I know you're hoping to come to the LGT. Are you able? Do you guys think you're making it to Scottish GT?
While we wait for that reply, Mr. J said he was in Oxford. Do we know Oxford?
Mm-hmm. Not really. It's generic down south.
Brilliant. Generic down south. Well, Mr. J, we can definitely put you in contact with people in and around North London areas. And I know that's not Oxford, but I'm sure there's people nearby. There's people in the Essex, Norfolk areas. Close.
There's Norfolk. There's a group up in Norfolk. There's people more centrally over in Derby, Birmingham way. I know there's people south of you. I can feel like there's a lot of groups that are maybe like an hour and a half away from you. I don't know of any I'm not aware of any particular Oxford group going on.
No.
Where's Chelmsford? Is Chelmsford North London?
Essex.
Essex.
Where I grew up, mate. Where I was a kid. Back when I was
cool
born.
Story.
I know, right? One other thing we'll do before we leave. He was on last week, but Leet Teddy Chris Eustace did win the ELO League with his Lannisters.
Good man.
Is he now officially the best Lannister player in the UK? I think he is. I don't know any other Lannister players in the UK are any good. Yeah, Chris Eustace, Leet Teddy, best Lannister player in the UK. We only know one other player who plays a faction in the UK who's a good player. That's Carlo with Baratheons. Not a Lannister player.
Nope, not anymore. I think Lannisters are also doing very, very well in the online. You know, I think it's called. It goes by War Games ID, right? Is what it's actually called.
Indonesian
War Games ID.
ELO event.
Indonesian ELO event.
Yep. The big online one, which we'll definitely have to spend some time and look into that properly, and see how that's going on, because it's quite a big event. So it's going to have some interesting statistics. But yeah. Oh, and the Tane.
The Baratheon guy, as he is, the Tane, says that he's about an hour north of him in Leamington Spa.
And so as well. Fab. Right then, we were going to look at all of the wicked badges, but actually, guys, you can have a look at the badges yourself. They're on the player rankings tab. Feel free to go through, have a look at all the awesome badges. Obviously, massive shout out to Mikkel again for collecting his 4th badge now. 3 if you, because neutrals aren't a faction. And Carlo's still only on a puny 1.
For those who don't know, that he has one of the few that little neutral thing in the corner, which shout out to Scott for putting that together for me. That little neutral bit in the corner says that you've also won with the neutral commanders. So that is in place, guys. If that's enough to make you go chase it, then I hope it is. If it's not, then tell me, and I'll maybe try and come up with a better image for you that makes you feel like it's more worthwhile. I'm really glad that people like to chase the badges, and Mikhail's done pretty well, but he's not the biggest badge holder, right?
And I wanted to give him a bit of a shout out on here. The biggest badge holder is Drogon.
Yeah,
he's Drogon on here, isn't he? It is Drogon who has won with neutrals, Lannister neutrals, Starks, Night's Watch, Baratheon, and Targaryen. And I kid you not, he is not just stopping there. He is the only player I've seen do this. Mad respect to him. He has now played over 230 games, nearly 240 games, and he is currently trying to get his Greyjoys, as you can see there. He has been and did try to squeeze in his free folk towards the end of the month as well. He's going for that this month. This man plays. We're working out right. It's like 30 games sometimes a week. It's unreal sometimes.
He is out there to prove me wrong when I said nobody has played every commander.
What was super funny?
All I can hope. I'm desperately hoping to, because I'm right. Like, I'm always right. I'm never wrong, guys. I'm just desperately hoping that Lannister heroes, Stark heroes, Greyjoy heroes all come out before he gets to the end of the list, and then I don't have to be wrong.
I mean, he's already got Lannisters. He's already
that will
got
delay
Starks.
me. That will delay the inevitable by about 5 days on his current rate.
What's actually super interesting is when we first did this, when we did the badge update, he had an exactly 50% win rate as well, which was remarkable for nearly 200 games played. Oh, it was over 200, I think, just over. So huge respect to Ross Drogon. Keep bashing out the games, man, I guess. If people are going to do it, people are going to do it. Mad respect. So, with that, we will leave you for this week. We'll be back next week with the last one before Christmas. This year, we probably are going to be doing Christmas break. We'll talk about it next week, obviously, because Carlo's away, and I don't think I'm going to be at home on the Monday, which means I literally can't stream it. So we might do something special for you over the Christmas period, and you never know. There might be some news come out. We'll see. Anyway, Enjoy all the awesome events happening this week, which I'm sure there's going to be plenty. If I quickly load up the list, we have got the Warsaw ELO Revenge. Shout out to the guys in Poland yet again. An event in New Jersey. Shout out to I think Jabor and the guys over there and Mythicos guys. Fabricators Forge having another ELO event, fantastic. A 40-point winter coming event in Tacoma, fantastic. House of Orcs happening on Sunday in Italy with the guys who hosted the previous event that was really interesting, the cool banner. Check out the Italian event there; they're usually pretty interesting. Watch out. And another event in Poland. Let me guess, there'll be another person. Peter will probably bet that one as well. And a random event running on a Sunday through to Tuesday in Berkeley, in the US as well. And that is it. That's all happening in the next 7/9 days. So loads of things to go and check out, guys. Loads of stuff to go and check out, depending on where you are in the world. Keep us updated. Send me some pictures of some nicely painted models for next week, because Carlo hasn't rated a picture in 3 weeks. It'll be by then. He needs something to do with his life because he's got nothing else better to do than rate random images from randomers.
I got a lot of things better to do. I've got a whole new army to paint.
Oh yeah, there's a challenge for anyone. Carlo has a new army. I challenge anyone to guess what it is for next week. It should be obvious.
I have about a month to get a new army ready to win a tournament with. So there you go.
And with that, guys, we will take it easy. I hope you all love your week, and thanks a lot for tuning in. See you later, guys.
Bye-bye.
Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth?